Alright, I'll keep this short and simple. Please go watch part 1 of this video before watching this one. Link to it down in the description. Alright, you back? Great, now let's get into the rest. And I'm really sorry for the length of this one, but I wasn't going to sacrifice quality for length. Let's begin. Five, Luigi's Mansion 3. You know what? I didn't play the original Luigi's Mansion, and I didn't get far in Dark Moon before I just kind of forgot about it. But despite that, I was actually really excited for Luigi's Mansion 3, and I knew I would like it. Well, as it turns out, I loved it. I went into Luigi's Mansion 3 with high expectations, and they were surpassed. Based on what I've gathered, Luigi's Mansion 3 plays more like Dark Moon, but without the mission-based structure people hated in that game. The game is somewhat linear, but nothing like Dark Moon. Rather than having the game be dark and atmospheric like the original game, it goes for full-on charming and goofy. The game literally takes place in a giant hotel called The Last Resort. That's just awesome. Seriously, this game is so charming, it's crazy. Luigi is such a lovable dork and you're rooting for him the whole way through. From Luigi's reactions to everything going on around him, to the ghosts goofing around in the hotel, to Egad's run cycle, to the main collectibles literally being elevator buttons, to the menu being a virtual boy, to my purest boy Luigi, I had a smile on my face throughout the entire game. The game is so much fun to play. Mechanically, it's closer to Dark Moon. You got your poltergust with a flashlight to stun enemies, and a dark light to reveal hidden objects. It plays basically how you would expect. You explore the many floors of the hotel solving various puzzles with your poltergust. But there are some new features added this time around. When Luigi is sucking up ghosts, he can now back throw them into the ground. It's so satisfying. Especially when you chain it by slamming ghosts into other ghosts, and then slamming that ghost into another ghost. Luigi can also now shoot a plunger with a rope to latch onto objects so he can pull them in. Excuse me? Luigi is strong enough to flip a couch and a piano over his head? Why are we sending Mario to rescue Peach when Luigi could chuck Bowser across the football field with one arm? The biggest new feature added is Gooigi. You know, that multiplayer slime Luigi that was in the 3DS Luigi's Mansion port that everyone forgot about? People were concerned at first that he was added purely for multiplayer's sake, and that it would halt the flow of the game in single player. But Gooigi blends his way into the gameplay very organically. He's functionally the same as Luigi, except he can go through metal bars and tight spaces Luigi can't go. But he's very fragile and is destroyed immediately by water. They implemented this mechanic so well. The puzzles that required Gooigi, or both of them simultaneously, did not feel forced or unnecessary, and I loved it. I can definitely see this being a standard mechanic from here on out. Now let's talk about the hotel itself. Man, this thing is a blast to explore. First off, the idea of exploring a haunted hotel instead of a haunted mansion is such a cool idea. Every single floor was incredibly different. One floor was a bunch of gift shops, an indoor garden, and then you got some non-traditional rooms like a movie studio, a museum, and even a pyramid for some reason. Who cares if it made sense? Every floor managed to be completely different and distinct from each other. I mean, sure, not every floor is as well made as another, and some are only a few rooms that are mostly for a boss fight. Puzzle-wise, I loved Paranormal Productions the most, but my favorite floors were probably the gift shops and the pirate restaurant for the theme alone. There's even a multiplayer mode called Scarescraper that can be just as fun as the base game. You and a team of Luigis are thrust into randomly generated hotel floors, and you have to complete the objective on the floor to continue. Usually capture all ghosts. It's a complete blast. Sure wish there's a proper couch co-op version though. Also remember back when the game was first announced and people were concerned with the graphics? Yeah, well now Luigi's Mansion 3 is probably the best looking game on the entire Switch. Seriously, why does this game look so good? It's insane how much this puts other Switch games to shame. The lighting, the quality, the details. I'm speechless. It's surreal. This game is so breathtakingly gorgeous. Luigi's Mansion 3 is amazing. I loved every minute of the game. I loved exploring the hotel and trying to solve all the puzzles, and especially finding every hidden gem. Plus, let me tell you, there is nothing more satisfying than sucking up every single coin and object that moves. It is physically impossible not to vacuum up every object in every room. It's an addiction on its own. Actually no, the actual best feeling in the game is when Luigi gets a chainsaw and pulverizes every piece of furniture in that room. That was absolute perfection. Or when you find a Boo and bash his head into the ground repeatedly within the span of 2 seconds. That never gets old either. There's just so much. Luigi's Mansion 3 was a joy to experience from start to end, and every Switch owner must play this game. 4. Super Mario Maker 2. I absolutely adore level creation games because the possibilities of what you can make are endless. The game has basically infinite replay value. Going into Mario Maker 2, the first game was already one of my favorite games of all time, and seeing that the second game is just the first one but better, yeah, there was no doubt I would love it. I find it strange how little attention Super Mario Maker 2 has gotten. The original, despite being on one of the least popular consoles of all time, seemed way more popular. Why is that? Mario Maker 2 is essentially the original game with tons of other stuff added to it, but yet it didn't even come close to the popularity of the first game. They added so much stuff to Mario Maker 2. I will never get over how funny it is that people wanted slopes so badly that the first thing they showed off in the reveal trailer was slopes. There's just so many new items added. On-off blocks, sideways thwomps, dry bone shells, twisters suck by the way, boom booms, pokies, spikes, and so many more. And other additions like vertical levels and rising lava and water. They finally added more level themes after endless begging. A desert theme, a snow theme, clouds, and a forest. Plus a new night feature for every theme that changes how they behave, such as the ghost house being pitch black, the sky being anti-gravity, the forest getting poison instead of water, etc. One feature added that no one knew they wanted was the extra game style, 3D World. 3D World behaves much differently than the other 4 styles. Aside from just the physics, 3D World completely changes most of the items. It has tons of exclusive items, enemies, and power-ups that aren't in the other themes. But there's a catch. There may be a lot of exclusive stuff, but there's also a ton of stuff that got removed, and I mean a lot of essential items. The new items are not enough to make up for what was lost, which makes the 3D World style very disappointing. I could keep going honestly about all the stuff added, but the most disappointing thing about Mario Maker 2 in comparison is the lack of new additions. The original game added all kinds of new items and enemies on a regular basis, and Mario Maker 2 has barely done that at all. Sure, they did have one major update that added more items, including the awesome Link power-up, but that's it so far, and the sad thing is I don't see them adding anything else. Who knew Nintendo would ever add multiplayer to the game? But it's kind of a mess. For starters, everyone used to complain that the online multiplayer was awful because of how laggy it was, but I don't think that was necessarily Nintendo's fault. If one person had bad internet, it doesn't matter how good everyone else's is. This can also apply to most games. Okay, let's just assume it works for you. A big issue is that the multiplayer breaks a lot of levels. 80% of the levels people made are not designed around multiplayer, and they are very easy to break. To the point of soft locking sometimes. And yet, it can also be a lot of fun. It's an enjoyable chaos most of the time. But that does remind me of one flaw with a game like this. People are absolutely awful at making levels. If you give the masses tools to create whatever they want, you will get absolute masterpieces buried within an ocean of utter trash. Nintendo really needs to prevent 5-year-olds from uploading, because who else would be proud enough to upload something this awful? It blows my mind how people actually upload stuff this bad. But that's just the nature of a game like this, and there's really nothing you can do about it. The only way to get to the amazing levels is to deal with the bad ones. I was originally going to put Mario Maker 2 much higher on this list when I first planned this, because the original is one of my favorite games of all time. But then I thought about it. I was only really putting it so high because I love the original so much. I just haven't played Mario Maker 2 nearly as much as I thought I would. Maybe I just don't have the time, patience, or creativity as I used to sit down and build levels for hours and hours anymore. I still absolutely love Mario Maker 2 way more than the original, but if we're going off playtime and investment alone, other games deserve to be way higher on this list. And the funny thing is, I still played for about 100 hours. It's a great game, I just don't have the patience for it anymore. Three, Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled. Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled was definitely the biggest surprise game last year. As I stated in my last video, I had barely played the original CTR, but I really looked forward to the remake. With moderate expectations, CTR Nitro Fueled went from a game I thought would be decent to a game I've played for 150 hours and still constantly play. CTR is not like Mario Kart in the slightest. If you go into it expecting it to be beginner friendly and play like Mario Kart, man are you in for a rude awakening. CTR is the exact opposite of beginner friendly. This game will tear you apart trying to learn it. It will take several days just to get used to the bare basic controls, let alone the advanced mechanics. Then understanding and mastering the advanced stuff like Reserve and Sacred Fire will take dozens upon dozens of hours of practice. Once you have mastered the game, it is one of the most satisfying experiences ever. There is no feeling like drift boosting off of the boost panel and maintaining maximum speed for as long as possible, especially Blue Sacred Fire. But yet, aside from having some of the most satisfying kart racing mechanics in existence, the tracks are all amazingly designed. CTR has a high focus on crazy shortcuts that take tons of practice, and it doesn't hurt that most of the tracks are great even excluding these shortcuts. But you know, I went into that in more detail last video. Shameless plug. There's even a single player adventure mode, but it's overrated. It's one of CTR's most famous aspects, but it's honestly not that good. It's just a collection of multiple races back to back with a couple of awful boss fights, all connected by a central hub you can drive in. Sure, there's extra challenge race types after you beat the main adventure, but you can do all of those outside the adventure mode anyway. I don't get the hype behind it. Definitely a disappointment. On top of having all the content from the original game, it also remade every track from Crash Nitro Kart, added brand new original tracks, and an endless amount of characters, karts, and customization options. There is so much content here that you will probably never unlock it all without playing for hundreds of hours. The amount of customization in this game is absolutely mind-blowing. There are over 40 different karts, over 300 unique character skins, supposedly 760 million different kart combinations with all the colors, stickers, and wheels. That is absolutely insane. Mario Kart wishes it had this level of customization. There's also over 50 characters. Almost every single character you could possibly want is playable now. Tawna, Brio, Nina, Koala Kong, Chicken Stew, freaking Mega Mix, Spyro the Dragon, a chicken with a crown, and excuse me, they added what? This is the greatest thing I've ever seen. Even characters no one wanted like the baby characters. Please get that off my screen right this moment. They listened to the fans so much they even added a fixed Rillaroot after messing up his face the first time. There are so many fan favorite characters that they are essentially out of options by this point. Another thing CTR handled much better than Mario Kart was how they dealt with all this extra content. Pretty much every single month since the game's released, they've held a Grand Prix. A month-long event that added one new track, usually multiple characters, and tons of new costumes and customization options. All for free, every month. This is the sole reason I kept coming back to CTR. Without them, this game still would have been great, but I wouldn't have played it as much as I did. But with them adding new content constantly, I'm always brought back to it to get all the new stuff added and try each new track. It was amazing, and this is how DLC in a kart racer should be handled. Again, let me emphasize how utterly nuts this is. 30 characters, over 25 vehicles, a couple hundred character skins, and hundreds of vehicle customization options, all added completely for free in not even a year. It saddens me greatly the Grand Prix are finally over. Rest in peace. You will be missed tremendously. And yeah, the game is not perfect. As much as I love CTR, I cannot ignore that the online is absolutely broken and desperately needs to be fixed. The online runs just fine and the system is fine enough. The issue is as stable as a toothpick. Lobbies will crash 3 out of 5 times. When it works, the online is good, but most of your time spent playing online will be attempting to even start a race. The rest of the game is pouring with love and effort from the developers, so it actually amazes me they haven't fixed their online at all. This is a pretty big issue when playing online is the most viable way to get Wumpa coins, which also could be another issue. If you want to enjoy CTR to its fullest, you have to play online constantly. This doesn't bother me, but if you don't have good internet or don't even pay for it, that will be a huge issue. I think the coin distribution is perfect online, but if you're not going to play online, you will have to grind for hours just to get anything. Because of this, I can see a lot of people not getting into this game. CTR requires an insane amount of investment, not just to learn and master the mechanics and tracks, but to unlock the skins and karts you want. But if you are willing to put in that time and effort, This is the absolute crown jewel of kart racing. CTR Nitro Fueled is more than just a remake. It's more than just a reimagining. It's its own entity. Beanox went above and beyond with one of the greatest remakes ever made. You can feel every ounce of love and effort they put into making this the best possible game they could. Well, aside from the microtransactions and weird exclusive carts, but that is more Activision's greedy little fingers. And I don't think it's fair to dismiss the effort Beanox did into making the rest of the game. I am still dumbfounded how a game I expected to be a Mario Kart clone turned into my favorite kart racer of all time. So I just want to end this by saying, thank you Beanox. Thank you for everything you've done to make this such an amazing experience. It's been one heck of a ride. Two, Fire Emblem Three Houses. Wow. Just wow. The only Fire Emblem game I played was Fire Emblem Fates, which I massively enjoyed despite everyone's hatred for them. So of course I was excited for a new Fire Emblem game on the Switch. When it was first shown at the reveal trailer, it didn't look that great to me. Don't get me wrong, I was excited for the mere existence of an HTFE game on Switch, and I knew I would like it, but what they showed specifically didn't look that interesting to me. Man, I could not have been more wrong. Crash Team Racing is technically the most surprising game last year because I expected very little. But on the other hand, I knew I would like Three Houses because it was FE. I just didn't expect how much I would love it. Three Houses is a complete masterpiece, and I don't say that lightly. This is one of the best games on the Switch. The game is split into two parts, exploring Garreg Mach and classic FE combat. The actual combat itself isn't really worth mentioning specifically. If you know what Fire Emblem is, it's practically unchanged aside from a couple of differences, and it's just as amazing. There's a strange addiction to its chess-styled battles that doesn't seem like it would be very fun. Although what I found strange was that the weapon triangle system, one of the series' staples, is practically non-existent in this game. A majority of the game will be spent wandering around Garreg Mach. There you can talk to people, complete side quests, shop, and participate in activities such as fishing, eating, tournaments, etc. It might not sound like much, because all you do is just walk around and talk to people, but it's surprisingly addicting. Even though it wasn't necessary, I always found myself talking to every single character possible every time I went back to Garreg Mach, because I wanted to know more about the characters, even in repeat playthroughs. Plus, doing activities with other characters helps tremendously with support conversations. And yes, support conversations are great, though only Byleth can reach S rank this time, and only at the end of the game. Did I mention that Three Houses is roughly 150 hours long? Assuming you do every route, that is. Three Houses is practically 3.5 games in one. And yet, Fates had the audacity to sell its pass separately at a full price. There are 3 different houses you can choose from at the beginning. The Blue Lions, the Black Eagles, and the Golden Deer. There are 4 different story routes in the game. One for each house and then a secret route for the Black Eagles. And every story is amazing. Keep in mind, I started with Black Eagles, then Blue Lions, Golden Deer, and I'm going through the secret route currently as of writing this. It doesn't matter which route you take, they're all great. Even though Silver Snow and Verdant Winds are very similar to each other, both routes are really great. I also heard that Crimson Flower is really good. And then there's Azure Moon. The Blue Lions route is without a doubt the best route in the entire game. The story is good in the other routes, but the Blue Lions path is on another level. If you only plan on playing one route, make it Blue Lions. A big concern of mine going in were the characters. It seemed like every character would just be a student, just with slightly different designs and a singular personality trait, but I could not have been more wrong. It's crazy how the game managed to have so many different characters, and have most of them be interesting, unique, and memorable. Sure, with as many characters as there are, each house is going to have uninteresting characters, but every single route made me appreciate almost every character that seemed uninteresting from the perspective of another route. You won't understand a character until you learn more of them through supports. I ended up loving so many of the characters in this game, with my personal favorite student being Felix. Even Byleth eventually grew on me despite having those stupid sleeve capes and being pretty soulless. He doesn't have a ton of personality, which in most cases would be a big problem, but in this instance, it actually kind of works of how it ties into the story. Then there's Dimitri. Dimitri is the best character in this whole game, and is the entire reason the Blue Lions route has the best story. I promise not to spoil anything, but his backstory and character are phenomenal, and his character arc is near flawless. It's so well done. And I promise you, you won't understand at all until you play Azure Moon. And do I even need to explain how incredible the soundtrack is? Just listen. I genuinely can't do the game justice here. Three Houses is a game that needs to be experienced. Its story, characters, combat, music, just everything. Sure, this fantasy, war-driven, walking college simulator chess game will not be for everyone. Fire Emblem is definitely an acquired taste. And trust me, you can't base it off what I showed here. Fire Emblem is so boring to watch. But even though everyone won't love the game, every Switch owner needs to at least give it a shot because it's so good. And it's the perfect entry point into the series. Seriously, go play this game right now. This is not just one of the best games on the Switch, this is one of the best games Nintendo has ever made. An absolute modern masterpiece. Before I get into my favorite game last year, I want to go over a few honorable mentions. I did allow ports released last year on this list, but only if it was my first time playing it. And this definitely was not my first time playing A Hat in Time. Originally, I had the game on PS4, and owning it on PS4 sucked because Gears for Breakfast apparently hates consoles. They never added any of the DLC at all, not even the free multiplayer update. I can't tell you how frustrating it was to see all the cool DLC that I would never have access to. And then there's the elusive Switch port. For ages, they denied that it was possible to port the game due to its engine, but then once a Switch port was finally announced, that was even more complicated. They never revealed a release date for ages, and when they finally gave us a release window in the spring, it didn't actually come out until October. For a long time, I was convinced the Switch port would never exist, but finally it actually existed, and I could not only play it on the go, but finally play the DLC I'd waited what felt like 2 years for. I won't go into why I like A Hat in Time. Just know that it's one of my favorite 3D platformers ever, and that it's arguably my favorite indie game. I went into the Switch port already loving the game. But that's a topic for another video several months from now, knowing my schedule. Instead, I'm going to talk about my experience with the Switch port, and specifically the DLC real quick. I thoroughly enjoyed both DLC packs. Arctic Cruise was pretty good, even though it was pretty short with no boss fight. And Yakuza Metro is probably my favorite level in the game. The level looks awesome despite the limitations of the Switch, and it's so much fun to traverse. Again, no boss fight, which is very disappointing since every single boss in the base game is fantastic. Overall though, great DLC expansions. But what I'm really here to talk about though, is Death Wish. If anyone were to ever complain that the base game is too easy, Death Wish would beat them into the pavement with one arm tied behind its back, laughing in their face. Death Wish is a series of ultra hard challenges that will break every ounce of sanity you have. These often take previous levels in the game and dial them up to 15, while some are rift challenges made by the community itself. The real highlights though are the boss fights. These are the hardest bosses I've ever fought in any 3D platformer ever. Your reactions and pattern learning will be pushed to your absolute limits as you die over and over and over again for hours on end, going completely insane trying not to break down into tears. But even though they're excruciatingly hard, I actually love the boss fights in Death Wish as a whole. It's unbelievably brutal, but I love the challenge, and the satisfaction of finally overcoming it is unparalleled. So one of my biggest complaints with the original game was how short it was, being only a couple of hours. When I bought the Switch version, I decided to 100% everything. so it took me about 10-15 hours to 100% the base game and the 2 DLC chapters. But I made the mistake of trying to complete all 111 Death Wish challenges, which is taking me, over 80 hours so far. Keep in mind, the only thing I've done is complete the game, the DLC, and Death Wish. That is literally the only thing I've done in a single playthrough. I haven't even finished it and it's taken me this long. 80 plus hours spent on a port of a pretty short platformer that I've already beaten in the past. That's how much I love this game and how determined I was to finish it. And admittedly, Marvel Ultimate Alliance is only on this list because I didn't allow a hat in time. In fact, had I allowed it, it probably would have been number 4. One other honorable mention would have to be Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Smash is obviously a 2018 game, but considering it's my favorite game of all time and that I played it for a measly 700 hours last year, it's definitely worth mentioning. If it can be nominated for the 2019 Game Awards, I can give it an honorable mention. Number 1, Kingdom Hearts 3. There is no doubt in my mind that my favorite game of 2019 is easily Kingdom Hearts 3. From the moment I played it, I knew nothing was going to surpass it for me. Strap in folks, this is going to be a long one. The road to Kingdom Hearts 3 was certainly interesting to say the least. If you haven't somehow noticed, I'm a huge Kingdom Hearts fanatic, but I wasn't in that bandwagon who were waiting 13 years for the game. I'd only gotten into the series in early 2018. But I was still definitely in the hype train along with everyone else, despite not waiting as long as them. And it became one of my most anticipated games ever since Smash Ultimate and Breath of the Wild. After many delays, the game finally launched in January of 2019, and it was met with mixed reactions to say the least. People have calmed down nowadays, but back when the game first launched, it was extremely controversial. Some hated the game, many were disappointed by it, and some loved it. While some of the disappointment is justified, which I'll get into, I think it was inevitable there'd be controversy regardless of how the game actually turned out. When you have a game that took 13 years to come out, fans will have built up expectations as to what they think it will be like, and the newcomers can't understand anything because the story doesn't hold anyone's hand. But what about my experience? As I was first playing the game, I was utterly blown away and fell completely in love with it. That feeling was comparable to my first time playing Breath of the Wild. However, by the time I finished the game, disappointments began to sink in. There were a couple of reasons why, but the biggest problem was that the game was way too easy. I played on normal difficulty just like I did the rest of the games, and I only died like 3 times. What made it worse was that there was no critical mode or extra bosses besides one. I didn't know how to feel. The majority of the game was one of the best things I've played, and the end, arguably the most important and impactful part, ended with such an underwhelming note. But I had to remind myself things like critical mode and data battles were not in the original versions of the older games. Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix added 20 bosses that were not in the original version of crying out loud, so I told myself to be patient with it. I went back to the game, played on Proud this time, with a few restrictions to make up for no critical mode yet, and I fell in love with the game all over again and put all those disappointments behind me. I could go on for literal hours talking about Kingdom Hearts 3 and still only scratch the surface, so I'll do my best to control myself. No promises though. Kingdom Hearts 3 has one of the best starts to a game I've ever played. Even besides the greatest opening cinematic in gaming history, the game takes no time to get straight into it. Instead of an overly drawn-out tutorial that lasts 3 hours, Kingdom Hearts 2. After the standard dream sequence tutorial, they give one small cutscene to set things into motion, and boom, you are already in Olympus. The opening level is perfect. It demonstrates the sheer size and scope of the new world perfectly, and it sets the standard of what's to come. In fact, not only did they somehow make Olympus good, it's actually one of the best worlds in the entire series. It jumped straight into the action with some pretty great starting combat and abilities, fantastic level design, and it's capped off by some extremely epic and intense starting bosses. Just look at this and tell me this isn't awesome. This is how you start a game. The game's story is not newcomer friendly, and I love that it doesn't hold your hand. It's the finale of the current 9-game saga, so it expects you to know everything that's happened so far. I think the story is good. It's not perfect, and it's far from the best story in the series, or quite as grand as it was built up to be, but I still think it's a perfectly fine end to the saga. But that could be a whole video in of itself. The combat is so amazing. Kingdom Hearts 3's combat is a fusion of 2s and Birth by Sleeps, which are the two best combat systems in the series. It plays more like Kingdom Hearts 2, but dry forms are replaced with the new Keyblade transformation. Form changes are probably the best mechanic in the series. Imagine dry forms, but they're activated like command styles in Birth by Sleep, and every Keyblade has its own form. Every one of these forms are crazy and over the top, drastically altering Sora's moveset to insane degrees. The best part is you can equip 3 Keyblades at a time and instantly swap between them with a D-pad, which allows you to do crazy combos with one form to switch to another Keyblade to activate another form. It's so good! In my opinion, Kingdom Hearts 3 has the best combat in the series. Don't get me wrong, I love Kingdom Hearts 2's combat, and I can completely understand if someone prefers it. But I will always love Kingdom Hearts 3's. I love the game's floatiness and aerial capabilities. You could theoretically stay in the air indefinitely with the right surfaces or enough enemies. I love how they brought back shot locks and made them not broken or useless. And as much as I love drive forms, I absolutely wouldn't mind if form changes become a standard mechanic going forth. I won't deny that it's not without its faults. For example, Grand Magic is kind of overpowered, and Attraction Flow is probably the worst mechanic ever added because of how broken, frequent, and unfun they are. It's actually sad they tried to make this awful addition a focus in lower difficulties. But this really isn't an issue because you can either just not use attractions or turn them off completely in critical or black code. Sora has never controlled so well in a Kingdom Hearts game before. Imagine if you took post Kingdom Hearts 2 Sora and mixed it with Dream Drop Distance, and that's Kingdom Hearts 3. The amount of movement capabilities is insane. On top of his usual abilities like high jumping, double jump, gliding, and now an actually good running speed, Sora can now instantly run up walls automatically. Let me reiterate, Sora can now canonically run up skyscrapers. Flow motion has returned as well, and it's actually balanced in this game. Unlike Dream Drop Distance, it doesn't break the game in half. It can still do crazy stuff, but it's actually built around the level design this time, and vice versa. Plus there's the new Air Step ability that allows you to instantly fly to any marker or enemy in a flash. All these combine into the best controls in Kingdom Hearts history. Traversing worlds has never been more fun in any game I've ever played. They even made swimming controls amazing somehow. It's unbelievable how far we've come since the original game. Kingdom Hearts 3 puts Dream Drop Distance to shame in terms of scale and exploration. Each world is utterly massive and filled to the brim with detail. In previous games, the worlds could be described as almost room-based. In Kingdom Hearts 3, there's practically no loading zones, save for a few areas depending on the world. This is the closest Kingdom Hearts has ever gotten to several open worlds. In fact, some levels are basically completely open worlds. Never before has exploration been more fun. The worlds are perfectly designed around Sora's insane abilities. Some Kingdom Hearts games, the combat is the best part and the exploration is just okay. And another, the exploration is the best part and the combat is okay. But Kingdom Hearts 3 is the first Kingdom Hearts game where the exploration is just as much fun as the combat, which I already made clear I love with a passion. The other Kingdom Hearts games look really good for their respective consoles, but this is the first true HD game we've gotten, and it's completely gorgeous. From the facial animations to the cutscenes to the incredible looking worlds, this is one of the most beautiful games I've ever played. Almost every Disney property looks so really close to the movie they're based on. And those completely seamless transitions from cutscene to gameplay never get old. It really is insane how far we've come since, well, that. And do I even need to bring up the soundtrack? It's just a fact that Kingdom Hearts will basically always have an amazing soundtrack, and Kingdom Hearts 3 is no exception. From its amazing field themes to its phenomenal boss themes, and especially the remixes. The remixes are incredible. Plus it also has the greatest piece of music that has basically ever been composed. Oscarita de Xehanort. I would preview some of the songs, except we'd be here all day and I would share essentially the whole soundtrack. Instead, here's a list of the best songs for you to go listen to in your own time. Your ears will thank me later. Arguably, the single most important aspect of a Kingdom Hearts game has to be its bosses. As much as I and many others love Kingdom Hearts 2's bosses, you've got to admit, there are a lot of not good bosses in there. In fact, I'd argue the only good bosses are the ones in coats. But Kingdom Hearts 3, almost every boss is consistently solid. Even the worst boss in the game is mediocre at worst. Kingdom Hearts 3 somehow managed to even make giant heartless battles fun. Don't get me wrong, when Kingdom Hearts 2 gets the bosses right, it gets them really right. But yet so does Kingdom Hearts 3. In fact, it has some of my favorite fights in the series. And I love the direction they took in the endgame with the doubles fights. Followed by the greatest boss fight in gaming history and a very solid final boss with several different phases. But as much as I love the game, I cannot deny it has several flaws, issues, and disappointments. But since the game's launch, many of my problems have been fixed in updates and DLC. The game is too easy, critical mode is added back, and the game goes from being amazing to phenomenal. Only one secret boss? Remind adds 15 of them, and they're all easily some of the best bosses in the entire series. The Kingdom Hearts original worlds are disappointing and underwhelming. Okay, well, actually that's still a problem. But one of the worlds got a little bit more depth to it. But honestly, one of the biggest issues is not with the game itself, but the road to its launch. Square spoiled practically everything in the trailers, and I mean basically everything. Every world, returning characters, important plot twists, and most of the story. It's half the reason I had such a hard time deciding how I felt about the story. Honestly, I could keep going. This is me controlling myself. Just imagine what could happen if I shared all my thoughts on this game. The road to Kingdom Hearts 3 was full of ups and downs and complications, but now I can confidently say, Kingdom Hearts 3 is my absolute favorite Kingdom Hearts game. I played the game 3 times, platinum trophied it, and played it probably about 140 hours. And then Remind came out a year later, and after 60 hours, it's probably my favorite DLC expansion ever. It doesn't matter how everyone else feels about this game. It doesn't change how I feel about it. It's an experience I will never forget. Kingdom Hearts 2 is still equally as amazing, but Kingdom Hearts 3 is not just my favorite Kingdom Hearts game, it's one of my favorite games of all time. And I will always defend it no matter what. And whether you agree with me or not, Kingdom Hearts 3 is my personal favorite game of 2019. But what really matters is,
this might be a good spot to find some ingredients.